The Liberators. The drums called before the world ever knew his name. Before the fame, before the fire and the fall, there was only a boy named Alvin, running barefoot through the dusty streets of Backa to Trenchtown, chasing the sound of drums that called his people to freedom. The rhythm was his heartbeat, the song his inheritance, and the dream his rebellion against a world that tried to silence him. From the ashes of raids and poverty, he would rise to build a movement through music, one that would lift a nation, heal the broken, and one day destroy itself from within. In the early 1960s, Alvin James was born in Backa, a maze of zinc and dust crouched behind the bright, restless streets of West Kingston. Corrugated roofs shimmered like broken mirrors beneath the Caribbean sun, and narrow alleys pulsed with the rhythm of survival, where laughter and hunger shared the same breath. The people of Backa lived close to the earth and closer still to struggle. Most were squatters, Rastas who had once lived in Pinnacle, the self-reliant commune founded by Leonard Percival Howell in the hills of St. Catherine. Pinnacle had been a dream of freedom, a living act of defiance against the chains of Babylon. The Rastafari community stood as a symbol of sovereignty, a sanctuary of dignity, and a declaration that liberation was not a gift to be granted, but a truth to be claimed. To the British authorities, that dream was subversive. They answered it with force. Police raided Pinnacle again and again, each time tearing down homes and scattering families. In 1954, they returned with fire. The hills burned for days, houses turned to cinder, fields to smoke, and the people fled through the dark with nothing but their children and their faith. Among the exiles were Pearl and Benjamin James, Alvin's parents. They carried the memory of Pinnacle's fall like a wound that never healed. In Backa, they tried to rebuild what Babylon had taken from them. A sense of belonging, a fragment of pride, and a future they could believe in. Yet oppression pressed on them from every side. The police prowled the streets of the ghetto, politicians stirred the poor against one another, and the system made survival a crime. When Alvin was 8, the police came again. Before dawn, the raid tore through the settlement, shattering doors and dreams in the same breath. His father was dragged away, beaten into the dust, and locked in a cell for more than a decade without a charge. His only crime was being a Rasta in the wrong place, at the wrong time, with the wrong truth on his tongue. That morning, as the sun bled over the hills, Alvin chased after the officers, crying, "Papa, what's happening? Why are they taking you?" Benjamin turned to him through eyes swollen and bruised. "Stay strong, son," he said softly. "They can shackle our bodies, but they can never touch our spirit." Smoke and diesel choked the air, the scent of fear and of men bound in chains, yet standing tall in faith. By 12, Alvin had buried his mother. The years of hunger and grief had taken her body long before death claimed her. She was another name, lost to poverty, another light dimmed by injustice. That morning he screamed into the silence, "Mama, wake up, don't leave me." A neighbor placed a hand on his shoulder. "She is gone, Alvin. You must keep walking. You must survive." Alone in the world, Alvin carried the story of his parents like an inheritance written in pain. The story of Pinnacle and the fire that destroyed it burned quietly within him, waiting for the day it would rise again. For months, the boy wandered through the dust and decay of West Kingston, sleeping beneath broken stalls and living off scraps from the market's refuse. The city moved around him as if he were invisible. Buses groaned, vendors shouted, music drifted through cracked windows, yet all of it seemed distant, like the echo of a world he no longer belonged to. Still, even in hunger, he carried a quiet flame within him, a stubborn spark born of his father's defiance and his mother's faith. One morning after a street dance, Alvin whispered to himself as he searched for empty bottles, "One day I'll make it out of the ghetto. One day the world will know this sufferer, a victim of the system, without mother or father." A man passing by shook his head. "Boy, keep your head down. Society doesn't care about grief, and the world does not care about dreamers." Alvin's eyes burned with quiet defiance. "Then I'll show them that dreams can speak into reality." One evening, as twilight pooled in the gutters, a friend of his father found him. The man saw a boy thin as a shadow, eyes bright with grief, and lifted him from the dust. He took Alvin to Trenchtown, where the air was thick with both hardship and creation, a place where the spirit of survival sang louder than despair. Trenchtown was a paradox. Tenement yards opened like chapels, humble and welcoming, while the streets pulsed with reverential rhythm and invention. Sound systems crackled to life in the evenings, filling the lanes with ska and rocksteady. Drums spoke to the bones, guitars cried for justice, and voices rose in unison, turning pain into melody and struggle into art. Alvin listened with the hunger of someone who had nothing left to lose. Every beat was a heartbeat he recognized, every lyric a fragment of truth. In the music, he found something that felt like freedom. By 14, Alvin had gathered 2 friends and formed a small vocal group. They sang on street corners, their harmonies rising above the noise of traffic and argument. Their songs told stories of hardship, love, and the Rastafari faith that gave them strength when everything else fell away. The group was short-lived, undone by poverty and the pull of survival, but Alvin's devotion did not fade. Music had already chosen him. He began to drift through Kingston's lanes, moving from one yard studio to another, searching for a sound that could carry the weight of his story. He spent long nights watching musicians work, learning how rhythm could speak when words failed, how a voice could rise from the depths of suffering and still sound like hope. At 17, Alvin moved to Waterhouse to live with his grandmother. It was another ghetto, crowded and poor, yet it pulsed with life, rhythm, and restless dreamers. Every corner seemed to hum with possibility. One afternoon, as he passed a group of teenage youths arguing over the best sound systems and rub-a-dub DJs, a voice rose above the noise and stopped him in his tracks. It was deep and melodic, steady as a drumbeat, carrying a frequency that needed no song to make itself known. Alvin paused, listening. Something in that voice stirred the flame within him, and he knew his journey was about to change. "Hey youth," Alvin called out, "what's your name?" The boy turned, surprised, a sliver of sunlight catching the curve of his face. "Jeremiah," he said, pointing to himself as if uncertain he had been chosen. "You ever sing before?" Alvin asked. Jeremiah laughed, half shy, half deflecting. "No, Rasta, I am not a singer. You ever try?" "Never had reason to." Alvin smiled. "You have a golden voice and don't even know it yet." Jeremiah glanced away. "My voice is just loud, nothing special." "Special enough to move mountains," Alvin said. "One day the world will hear it." Alvin smiled, hearing the timbre of musical vibration in the youth's voice, even through his modesty. "You got a golden voice," he said quietly. "It would be a shame to let it waste. Think about it." Jeremiah only shrugged, eyes drifting toward the ground. He mumbled something about getting home before dark and began to walk away. Alvin stopped him and leaned closer. "Don't be shy. You have something inside you that can captivate the world and shake down the walls of Babylon and free the captives." Jeremiah frowned slightly. "I'm not sure. My voice is just loud, not powerful." Alvin grinned. "Powerful or not, I see it in your eyes. That's enough for me." He watched Jeremiah go, the late afternoon light catching the dust around his feet like smoke. He had seen something in that youth, something raw and bright, a spark waiting for breath. A few days later, Alvin stood at his grandmother's gate, watching the street slide into its usual chaos. Children chased each other, a radio played somewhere nearby, and the smell of frying fish hung in the warm air. Suddenly, 2 teenage girls burst into a quarrel at the corner. Their voices clashed like drums, fierce and musical, rising and falling in rhythm with their anger. One girl's tone cut through the noise of the lane. It was clear, steady, and full of fire. Alvin found himself listening not to the argument, but to the sound of her voice, a natural melody hidden inside her fury. When the taller girl lunged, he leapt forward and pulled them apart, dragging the smaller one into the safety of the yard. "Why are you fighting?" he asked. She caught her breath, eyes still blazing. "Them girls up the road are always ganging up on people. I won't let them bully me." Alvin studied her, noting the strength in her stance and the defiance in her tone. "You have a powerful voice," he said. "You ever sing?" She frowned, still wary. "No. I can teach you," he said. "I can make you shine like the jewel you are." A small smile touched her lips. "That's my name, Jewel." From that day on, Alvin took her under his wing. Each evening, they met in his grandmother's yard as the sun sank behind the zinc roofs and the sky turned the color of copper. He taught her pitch, rhythm, and control, showing her how to turn emotion into melody and pain into strength, One evening, Jewel frowned at a scale. I sound wrong every time I try the note. Alvin shook his head. No, you sound like the sun breaking through clouds. You just need to trust it. Jewel bit her lip. I'm afraid I'll mess up in front of people. Alvin placed a hand on her shoulder. Fear is a song too. Sing it and conquer it. Slowly, her voice began to bloom, bright and pure, like light breaking through a storm. A few weeks later, as they sat in the yard, Jewel beamed with confidence. Nothing can hold my tongue now, she said. I don't even hear my own fear anymore. Alvin smiled. Exactly. Now sing. As Alvin and Jewel sang together in the yard, a small crowd gathered outside the gate, drawn by the warmth of their harmonies. The sound floated through Waterhouse, gentle yet powerful, like a prayer set to rhythm. Children perched on fences, elders leaned on canes, and for a brief moment, the narrow lane seemed to breathe in unison with their song. Among the listeners stood Jeremiah. He watched from the shadows, frozen by what he heard. The melody seemed to reach inside him, stirring something he had long kept silent. When the crowd began to drift away, he stepped forward. Jewel, he said softly, where did you learn to sing like that? She pointed at Alvin, smiling. He taught me. Jeremiah turned to Alvin, his voice low with respect. Teach me too. Alvin smiled. When you're ready. It did not take long. Within weeks, the three of them began to sing together. Alvin led at first, shaping their sound with patience and precision. As Jeremiah's voice deepened and grew more commanding, Alvin stepped back, content to guide rather than lead. He named their group the Liberators. Their mission was simple yet sacred: to use reggae as a weapon of rebellion, to awaken the oppressed, to free minds and uplift spirits. In a city scarred by poverty and violence, their music became a heartbeat of resistance, a promise that freedom could still be sung into being. They sang in the yard, in the streets, on sound systems, and at community gatherings, their music spreading through Waterhouse like fire in dry cane. The sound carried beyond the zinc fences, echoing in the lanes, and reaching those who had forgotten how to hope. But Alvin wanted more. He wanted a band, a full sound that could lift their message higher. Through his friend Danny Dredd, he met two musicians who had recently left a major studio band after a dispute. Their names were Bobby and Jake, a bassist and a drummer. Their rhythm was alive with invention, a bold mix of roots reggae, funk, and dub. Alvin loved their sound, though he disapproved of their sharp clothes and black American swagger. T-shirts with elaborate designs tucked into flared pants, bright braided belts, and slick jerry curl hairstyles that glistened against their sweaters. If you want to play with the Liberators, he told them, you have to look militant, live righteous. Babylon cannot see confusion in our movement. At first, Bobby bristled, pride rising like heat from the asphalt, but Alvin's conviction softened his resistance. Within months, both men grew their dreadlocks and embraced the discipline of faith. Under Alvin's guidance, the Liberators became more than a band. They became a family, bound by purpose. They rehearsed every day in his grandmother's yard, the small space alive with rhythm and devotion. Mornings began with jogs along the beach, where they chanted to the sunrise. Evenings ended in song, voices rising into the night until the stars seemed to listen. Being a perfectionist, Alvin often pushed them hard. Rehearsals could grow tense, but they always ended in unity. One afternoon, as he guided the musicians through a new rhythm idea, Bobby's frustration bubbled to the surface. Bobby plucked his bass sharply. We should do it like this. Alvin raised a hand. We all have ideas, but music is more than technique. Can you feel it, Jake? Jake laughed as his drumsticks clattered against the snare. Feel it? I feel frustrated, more like. From the side, Jewel called out, give them time. Music is bigger than arguments. They argued, laughed, and disagreed to agree, shaping every note until the sound and lyrics fit perfectly. Their music became pure energy. Bobby's bass pulsed like a heartbeat. Jake's drums spoke in riddles and revelation. The percussionist, guitarist, saxophonist, and keyboard player blended in perfect harmony. Jewel's voice rose with brightness and grace, while Jeremiah's baritone rolled through the air like thunder. At the center stood Alvin, shaping the music with patience and faith, binding every note to the message of Rastafari, freedom, truth, and upliftment for all who would hear. When they finally entered the studio, the energy was electric. The songs poured out of them like prophecy set to rhythm. Every track carried the weight of their journey, the memory of struggle, and the fire of faith. When the records reached the streets, Jamaica caught flame. Every radio spun their tunes. Every youth knew their lyrics by heart. The Liberators had become the new sound of revolution. Soon they signed a major deal and released their first album. Within weeks, it climbed to #1 on the Billboard chart. Critics called it a revolution in roots music, a voice of defiance for a restless generation. The world listened, and for the first time, the message of Waterhouse and Backa Wall echoed in cities far beyond Kingston. They won a Grammy, toured across continents, and stood before roaring crowds who lifted their fists to the rhythm of freedom. Journalists called them the next great reggae act after Bob Marley, but Alvin reminded them that they were not walking in another man's shadow. They were continuing a movement that had never died, carrying the torch of liberation through song. But success carried its own darkness. The road became a blur of airports, flashing cameras, and sleepless nights. Every show brought cheers, but behind the applause lay exhaustion and quiet resentment. Managers interfered in their decisions. Money began to twist friendships. Fame, once a blessing, started to feel like a curse. Yet it was a woman who would turn harmony into discord and unity into division. Quietly, she fanned the flames of Jeremiah's ego, certain that without his fire, their fame would fade to ash. Jeremiah had become the face of the group. His deep voice and fiery charisma made him a star. Crowds shouted his name, and little by little, he began to believe that he was the Liberators. The vision Alvin had built, the mission born in Waterhouse, began to fade beneath the glare of the spotlight. One evening, after a tense recording session, Alvin confronted him. "Jeremiah, you cannot keep taking all the credit. This is a group. We built this together." Jeremiah's jaw tightened. "You always want to hold me back, Alvin. I am the voice people come to hear. I am the one carrying this band." Alvin's eyes burned. "Carrying it? You forget who taught you to sing, who brought this group together when there was nothing. You are not the Liberators, Jeremiah. We are." Jeremiah slammed his hand on the table. "You think you made me. I made myself." Alvin stepped closer, eyes blazing. "Maybe the world only wants you. Maybe you don't need any of us. But without me, you're nothing." Bobby, never one to miss a spark, shook his head, his voice rough with hurt. "You're a wasp, brethren." Jake stepped in front of Bobby, his lips twitching with controlled anger. "Jeremiah, you only learn how to build a cone, believing you're a bee, but you don't know how to make honey yet." Jewel stepped between them, trembling with anger and heartbreak, her voice breaking as she spoke. "Stop it, all of you. This is not the way. We built this on love, on respect. You are all important. Alvin, Bobby, Jake, calm down. Jeremiah, remember why we started this. We are stronger together. United we stand, divided we fall." For a moment, silence filled the room. Jeremiah's chest rose and fell as he looked at her, and Alvin's shoulders sank slightly. The argument had ended, but the tension lingered, a shadow over the music they had once made so freely. Whispers followed Jeremiah wherever he went. "You don't need them," people told him. "You are the real talent. You can do this alone." But the voice that swayed him most was that of a woman whose beauty and charm lured him toward a love that would soon bind him in marriage, without the presence of loved ones, friends, or family. Jeremiah began missing band meetings. One day, when the manager distributed advances for an upcoming show, Jeremiah was absent. Jewel accepted his share to pass it along later. That evening, Jeremiah and Dolores, the newlyweds, sat on the veranda. As Jewel handed him the envelope, Dolores quickly took it and counted the money. Her face tightened with greed and disappointment. "You would earn more if you performed solo," she said. Jewel was taken aback. "Why would you say that?" she asked calmly. "The music is not about one name or money. It is about the message." Jeremiah muttered, "Message or not, I want my credit." Credit means nothing if the music dies, Jules said. Don't let greed silence your soul. Don't listen to her, Dolores snapped. They need you. You don't need them. The words took root, feeding Jeremiah's pride. He began showing up late to rehearsals and studio sessions. On stage, he started changing lyrics, throwing off Jewel and Alvin. After one such performance in Germany, Alvin confronted him backstage. Brethren, Alvin said sternly, why do you keep changing the song on stage? Jeremiah flung his jacket onto the floor. I'm tired of you always acting like you're the man, he shouted. The people love me, not all of you. Alvin's voice stayed low and firm. The man, we are a group. You forget that because crowds scream your name. Jules stepped between them, hands outstretched. Enough. Remember why we started. Disharmony is a chain. Dissension only leads to the bondage of discord and bitterness. Freedom, peace, love, and harmony are what we sing. Jeremiah's ego was growing into a monster. Alvin tried desperately to hold the band together. He spoke of the cause, the message, the roots that had birthed them, but trust had already begun to rot. Jeremiah accused the record label of stealing from him and blamed Alvin for standing in his way. Alvin, weary and bruised by disappointment, accused the label of twisting numbers and turning brothers into rivals. What had once been a brotherhood now felt like a battlefield. By the time their second album, Unity, won another Grammy, the Liberators were broken beyond repair. Still, Alvin refused to let go. He called one final meeting, a last attempt to mend what fame had torn apart. It was meant to be private, just him, Jewel, and Jeremiah. But Dolores came too, her hand locked around Jeremiah's arm, as if afraid someone might steal him away. Jeremiah, the three of us are like family, Alvin began, his voice trembling with sincerity. For a moment, Jeremiah's hard expression softened, but Dolores tightened her grip. She rolled her eyes at the word family, as though it were an insult. If you leave us, Alvin continued, you're breaking a bond. You're walking away from everything we built, everything we fought for. Dolores's fingers dug deeper into Jeremiah's arm, willing him to answer her way. Jeremiah drew in a sharp breath. I'm a man now, he said, a husband, head of my own family. I'm tired of living in someone else's shadow. The people want me, Alvin. You just hold me back. Jewel stepped forward, her eyes fierce. This isn't you, Jeremiah, she said. Stop letting pride speak for you. Alvin taught us everything we know. Don't be ungrateful. Don't destroy the music, and don't destroy each other. We were here before anyone else. She turned to Dolores, her voice trembling with restrained anger. Be careful what you feed him. Jeremiah, be a man. No one loves you like we do. It's easy for people to call you a star, but we're the ones who helped you reach the sky. Don't turn your light against us. Dolores's patience snapped. We're done here, she hissed, pulling him toward the door. I won't stand by while they try to manipulate you. She yanked the door open and slammed it shut behind them. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. Jewel pressed her hands to her face, trembling. Alvin stood still, staring at the closed door, the silence around him heavy and final. The Brotherhood had ended, not with music, but with the sound of a door closing. The split was not a single moment. It was the slow result of bad influence and wounded pride. The Liberators had never been perfect. They were strong-willed, passionate, and often clashed. Each had a voice, a vision, a spark that could either illuminate or ignite. Yet, like a true family, they always found their way back. Disagreements ended with laughter, grudges faded before morning, and their music carried them through every storm. Until Dolores came into the picture. With fame, the band began crossing boundaries once closed to dreadlocked Rastas from the ghetto. One of those boundaries was the gated world of uptown Kingston. It was there that Jeremiah met Dolores Silvera, a light-skinned woman whose beauty was dazzling and whose ambition was darker still. Her allure was undeniable, but beneath her charm lay a calculating heart. Alvin had seen that kind of smile before, the kind that promised warmth but carried a chill beneath it. His judgment of Dolores, even at first sight, proved true. Though his friend was too captivated to see it, she was manipulative and controlling, soon wrapping Jeremiah's mind, body, and soul under her command. Within months of meeting, they married in secret. The news hit like thunder. No one had seen it coming, but soon everyone understood that Dolores was in control. despite an agreement made at Jeremiah's own request that no partners would join them on tour. Dolores was always there. Promoters were forced to buy an extra plane ticket for her every time they traveled. The mood that once filled tour buses with laughter and music turned heavy and cautious. The band walked on eggshells around her, wary of her sharp tongue and colder stare. One promoter, tired of the constant demands, had once called the band's manager. "We cannot keep paying for her ticket," he said. "This is a major European tour and the budget is already tight." The manager called Jeremiah. "Jeremiah," he began gently, "the promoter is refusing to buy a ticket for Dolores. We cannot risk losing the booking. Maybe she can sit this one out." Before Jeremiah could reply, Dolores's voice cut through the background. "If I do not go, Jeremiah stays," she shouted. "I have to be there to cook for him. I am his wife, and only I must feed my husband. I do not trust anyone else with his food." The manager sat in stunned silence, waiting for Jeremiah to speak, to say something that might restore his respect. But Jeremiah said nothing. Finally, with a weary sigh, the manager reached into his own pocket and paid for her ticket himself, desperate to keep the tour alive. The Liberators had become a symbol of both artistic brilliance and human fragility. Their revolutionary blend of militant rhythm, deep bass, and haunting harmony had shaped a sound that redefined modern reggae. But Dolores had tried to tear the heart out of that music. With her now acting as his manager, Jeremiah walked away to begin a solo career, chasing the glitter of fame he could no longer resist. Alvin refused to let the vision die. He soon found a young singer to fill the space Jeremiah had left behind, proving that Jeremiah was not as indispensable as Dolores had made him believe. The Liberators rose again, their flame rekindled. They released another Grammy-winning album and toured relentlessly, their music burning brighter than ever. Jeremiah's solo career stumbled. The fire he carried with the group could not burn on its own. The music lost its soul, and the crowds that once roared his name began to fall silent. For Alvin and the Liberators, it was a different story. Their songs reached new heights, embraced across continents. Alvin had written the lyrics, arranged the melodies, and guided Jeremiah into stardom. In all his years with the Liberators, Jeremiah had co-written only a handful of songs. His voice, once commanding, was empty without Alvin's words and the rhythms of Jake and Bobby. Missing too was Jules' angelic harmony, which had softened his rough edges and given the music its warmth. The Liberators had been more than a band for Jeremiah. They were a family born of struggle and spirit. Their music carried the heartbeat of a people, the cry for freedom, the voice of the poor. It spoke of pain, hope, and defiance. Without Jeremiah, the Liberators continued to move the world, but Jeremiah himself was undone by the very forces their songs had warned against: greed, pride, and the hunger for power. Without Alvin, his lyricist, mentor, and arranger, Jeremiah could not produce a single hit. Not one of his songs made the charts. Dolores grew bitter and superstitious, accusing Alvin of witchcraft. "Your wicked friend work OBO on you," she would say. She dragged Jeremiah from one Obeah man to another, spending what little money they had left, searching for deliverance that never came. Yet the real curse was not sorcery. It was Jeremiah's blindness to his wife's greed, deceit, and manipulation. After 5 years of misery and mismanagement, Dolores had stripped Jeremiah of everything: his fortune, his home, his friends, his purpose, and his pride. When she finally divorced him, she left him broken and bankrupt. Everything he owned was in her name, like nature. Dolores left him sorrowful, a man hollowed by years of pain that grew from control, manipulation, isolation, and failure. Heartbroken, homeless, and penniless, Jeremiah retreated to the only place still his, a small cabin in the hills of St. Mary. Meanwhile, the rhythms of the Liberators still echoed through the streets. Their songs poured from sound systems in every corner of Jamaica, crossed the oceans into foreign lands, and lived in the hearts of dreamers who believed that music could inspire, entertain, and lift them from their troubles long enough to dance. The songs became prayers, anthems, and reminders that art could rise above oppression. When Alvin learned of Jeremiah's plight, he reached out without hesitation. Jewel and the others felt a deep ache for their former lead vocalist, the brother they had lost to bad advice and the wickedness of a woman's heart. That early afternoon, Alvin and Jewel drove to St. Mary. They found Jeremiah in a field, farming under the hot sun. His clothes were worn, his body lean, his face shadowed by hardship. When he looked up and saw them, the garden fork slipped from his hand and landed in the soil. For a moment, he stood frozen in disbelief. Alvin stepped forward. "Jeremiah," he said, "we came back from tour this morning and heard what had happened. We drove straight here." "Alvin, my brethren," Jeremiah murmured, his voice cracked and weary. "I never knew a woman could be such a Jezebel, so dreadful." Alvin drew closer. "Do not blame the woman for your downfall," he said quietly. "Blame the weakness in yourself, the blindness of a man too in love to see truth." Jeremiah lowered his head, staring at the earth he had just tilled. Jewel walked up to him and wrapped her arms around his shoulders. "We are here for you," she said softly. "We will help you back on your feet." Jeremiah's eyes filled with tears as Jewel held him. For the first time in years, he felt like a man, not a headline, not a voice on vinyl, just a soul forgiven. In her arms, he felt a warmth that was neither pity nor pride, but forgiveness itself. The silence around them was deep, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the distant hum of the hillside breeze. Alvin placed a hand on Jeremiah's shoulder. "Come back to the music," he said. "Come back to the truth that gave us life. You still have a voice, and it still matters." Jeremiah shook his head slowly. "I am not that man anymore, Alvin. The people have forgotten me." Alvin smiled faintly. "The people forget faces, not souls. The music will remember you. It always does." They stayed with him through the afternoon, helping him pack a few belongings, sharing memories of old times when laughter filled their rehearsals and their dreams seemed endless. As the sun sank behind the hills, Jeremiah looked out over the valley, a small spark of hope stirring again within him. That evening, they drove back together to Kingston. For the first time in years, Jeremiah sat in the same car with his family of rhythm and faith. Jewel hummed a melody in the front seat, and Alvin tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, forming a rhythm. Jeremiah listened quietly, the sound rekindling something long buried. Within weeks, Jeremiah was back in the studio. His voice was rough from years of silence, but Alvin guided him patiently, helping him find his strength again. Jewel's harmonies rose beside him like light breaking through clouds. Together they recorded a new song, one that spoke of forgiveness, resilience, and rebirth. When the track was released, it swept through the island like a hurricane. Crowds sang along, and tears filled the eyes of those who remembered the fall and rise of the Liberators. Jeremiah had come home, not as a star, but as a man redeemed by truth, friendship, and the power of song. One night after a sold-out concert, applause still echoed faintly beyond the door. Outside, the fading crowd murmured in the distance. Jeremiah and Jewel sat in the dressing room, the air thick with the haze of ganja and the scent of sweet perfume. Their laughter had faded into silence, the kind that only comes when hearts are heavy with unspoken truths, the kind that settles when love and regret share the same space. Alvin walked in, paused, and looked at them. His eyes carried the weight of years of knowing, the kind that comes from observing more than speaking. "Jeremiah," he said quietly, "you know I love you as my brother." Jeremiah smiled, weary but sincere. "I love you too, brother, and I'm sorry for my mistakes." Jewel reached out, her hand resting gently on Jeremiah's arm, her thumb brushing his sleeve. "No one is perfect," she said softly. "We all stumble. What matters is if we learn from it." Alvin shook his head slowly. "Jeremiah," he said, his voice tightening, "you've yet to learn. You're still blind to see true love when it stands right in front of you." Jeremiah straightened, confusion flickering in his eyes. Jewel shifted uneasily, her hands folding in her lap. "I've watched for years," Alvin continued, his tone both pained and resolute. "The way Jewel looks at you with affection and longing. She is too shy to say it, hoping you would feel it too." Jeremiah turned to Jewel. Her eyes fell to the floor, her breath trembling. "Don't make another mistake you will regret," Alvin warned softly. "Her love for you is pure and undying." As his final word left the air, Alvin turned and walked out, closing the door behind him with quiet finality. For a long moment, silence filled the room, broken only by the sound of their hearts beating and their heavy breathing. From outside came the sharp clang of metal as equipment was packed away. Jeremiah's voice broke the stillness, low and uncertain. "Is it true?" he asked, barely above a whisper. Jules' eyes stayed downcast, her fingers twisted nervously in her lap. "Yes," she breathed. "It's true." Jeremiah rose slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I was afraid," she said, her voice trembling, "afraid to lose what we already had." He stepped closer, the space between them shrinking like a held breath. Gently, he reached for her hands. "Look at me," he said. She lifted her eyes, and in them he saw years of love, patience, and silence breaking. "I felt it too," Jeremiah whispered. "All this time, let's not allow fear to steal any more of our days." Tears welled in her eyes as she stood, and for the first time their gazes met, open and unguarded, full of everything they had left unsaid. "I've dreamed of this moment," Jewel whispered, her voice quivering like a final note in a love song. Before she could say another word, Jeremiah pulled her close. Their lips met, hesitant at first, then certain, a kiss, years in the making. They held each other tightly, as if afraid to ever let go again. The noise of the world fading until there was nothing left but the sound of two hearts finding harmony again. Over a year later, Jewel, 7 months pregnant, and Jeremiah were married in the presence of family and friends. The ceremony was a traditional Rastafari wedding. The bride and groom wore royal Ethiopian coronation attire, standing together as king and queen. Their union was blessed with love and respect. They were rooted in love, like trees planted by rivers of water, and in due season, they bore 3 children. Together, they raised their family in a home filled with warmth, laughter, and faith. Years passed, and the music of the Liberators became legend. Their songs played at street corners and in schools, in dance halls and on distant shores. Each lyric carried the echo of their journey, a reminder that from pain could come beauty, and from struggle could rise unity. Alvin grew older, his dreadlocks grayed, but his spirit remained young. He often sat beneath the same mango tree in Waterhouse, where he had first dreamt of music that could lift hearts and heal wounds. Sometimes, children from the neighborhood would gather around him, eager to hear stories about the early days, about friendship, betrayal, and redemption. He would smile and say, "Music is life, and life is music. Both need harmony to survive." Jeremiah, now at peace, lived quietly with his family in St. Mary, tending his garden and mentoring young singers who came seeking his wisdom. Jewel, his virtuous wife, continued to shine, her voice a thread that wove each new generation of dreamers to the past. Together, they remained bound by sacred vows, by family, rhythm, memory, and love. Alvin never married, but he had 5 children out of wedlock. Through music, he became a husband, a father, a brother, an uncle, and a mentor to fans around the world. When his time finally came, the world mourned. The streets of Jamaica were filled with sound systems, playing Rise Again, the song that had reunited the group. The voices of thousands rose into the evening sky, carrying his spirit on the wind. And somewhere beyond the hills, where the sound of drums meets the whisper of the sea, the rhythm of the Liberators played on, eternal, unbroken, and free. Their story was one of brilliance and pain, of unity and betrayal, of freedom and fall, but above all, it was the story of Alvin James, the boy from Backa who refused to let his people's voices be silenced. He believed in the power of words, of sound, and of courage to liberate a people. And for many, his music became a force of emancipation from mental slavery, a call to stand for equal rights and justice. The drum and bass line still call, and the boy from Backa still runs, barefoot, free, eternal. If you enjoyed the story, show some love, like, comment, and subscribe to Word, Sound, and Story, where Troy Mackenzie transforms real-life experiences into meaningful, dramatic, and entertaining tales. Thanks for watching. Drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. Bless up.